Erin Pearson, the host of Decisions Now, which is a podcast brought to you by Evalueserve about how to leverage data and AI to improve business decisions. Today, we are joined by our guest, Marine Cornelis, an expert in energy transition and consumer protection. Marine works in public and private organizations, helping them navigate the complex landscape of energy fairness and sustainable transformation. She's also an author and a host of the Energy Ethics podcast and brings a lot of really cool and unique insights into how businesses can foster trust while implementing innovative energy solutions. So Marine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you for the presentation.
Yeah. So today we're going to explore the balance between technical innovation and human-centered approaches in energy transition. So just to jump right in and setting a bit of context, Marine, could you help our listeners understand what energy fairness actually means in today's context and why it's becoming increasingly critical for businesses to address this?
Okay, so we have different, let's say, approach to energy fairness. The first one is related to having access or not to modern energy in the sense of electricity or, let's say, clean cooking solutions, right? And on this particular really issue, you still have about 1 billion people around the planet who don't have access to clean and modern energy, and about 3 billion people who don't have access to clean cooking facilities. And the people who are most vulnerable to that are women and children. They will suffer from different, burdens from breathing toxic fumes to having to collect some fuels such as wood, and it takes a lot of toll, let's say, on their health, on their well-being, and on their own development as well. But on the other hand, if you think about developed modern countries or continents, so what you see in Europe, what you see in the US, is that you still have a part of the population that is deprived of, let's say, the capacity to properly heat or cool themselves in the context of their own nations or countries. Meaning that, for instance, in Europe, we have about less than 20% of the European population who is not able to heat themselves properly. Meaning that they have to, in their home, they feel cold. If they ever raise the temperature or try to raise the temperature of their home, they actually can't afford that. They have to make sacrifices. And very often in Europe or in really developed countries, it's understood as a dilemma between heating and eating and cooling as well. But that's exactly where this kind of energy fairness nexus is, because we talk about AI, we talk about a lot of modern and fancy words, but we shouldn't forget that actually not having access to electricity, not having access to modern energy, including modern facilities and safe facilities for gas, for instance, is an enormous problem for a huge part of the population. And that needs to be addressed, and really quickly.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing, just to go back to what you were saying at first, you kind of forget a lot of things that aren't in your day-to-day life. So thinking, 1/7 or 1/8 of the population doesn't even have access to it in the first place. But then in addition to your examples in Europe, you can look at Texas in the US in particular. They make the news every year because the power grid can't support the number of people who are using it. So especially as the weather is increasingly changing at a more rapid pace and it's being it's less predictable at this point, it has a lot of impacts on the power grid as a whole as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're seeing, rapid technological advancements in the energy sector, particularly with AI, like you were just saying, and smart devices. Yep. Yet you often emphasize this human aspect of energy transition. So what elements do companies oftentimes overlook when they're implementing these technologies?
So they have to think of the why. Why do we need those kind of advancements? Is it just to be fancy and to kind of jump on a trend? Or is it to actually serve the need of the people, serve the need of the population, serve the needs of your clients, serve the need of the, industry, serve the needs really of a consumer group that you need to target, right? So it's about getting back, I think, to this kind of why. And there are innovations. There are innovations that are actually actually needed to make sure that, for instance, the grid is more resilient. Because the energy transition, which is really the backbone of everything we are talking about, really the decarbonization, making sure that we use less, that we produce less greenhouse gas emissions, that we use less fossil fuels in producing electricity, for instance. This actually needs some automation, and automation goes with digital tools, right? So you have to think of which tools will be are needed and how they will be used, for instance. And this, let's say, decarbonization and digitalization, they go together with the decentralization, the fact that you have more, let's say, remote places, diverse areas where the energy is produced, more local, for instance, and also more democratization, more democratized approach, meaning that people must have their say in the ways things are being developed. And in the US, it's really, really interesting what is happening at the moment, because there are many, let's say, groups that are trying to develop their own production of energy in really closer to the homes, but there are also a lot of confrontation with opponents. So it's a phenomenon called as NIMBYism, not in my backyards. And actually, it's all the same, let's say, all the same conversation, because it has to do with agency and agency in our future, how we will make sure our energy, the decarbonization of our economies, which is totally necessary and should go faster, is actually something that where people have their say into.
Yeah. Well, I really like that, the start with why that you have. I think that, different people coming in from different perspectives and how you apply it, whether it's on a, by country or by city basis, and also the individuals in the company that you're talking about, the reasoning is always a bit different. So it changes the approach. And that's really where that human element comes in to make sure that everything runs hopefully as smooth as possible to make those advancements. So you've discussed the importance of boosting participation in energy transition quite a bit. What are some of the successful strategies that you've seen companies use to engage consumers who want sustainability but are hesitant about those associated costs?
Yeah, it's always the kind of chicken and egg conversation. Where do you start? How do you start? Because you don't really want to change anything about your behavior. You're already feeling comfortable with your behavior, or maybe you're already making sacrifices, which is, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, which is also a big dimension. So how do you make sure that some of, let's say, the choices that you make are as smooth and easy and really no-brainers, really something that you can go into and without having to make this kind of leap of faith. So there are companies that do really some proactive, they do have some proactive approaches. For instance, by communicating better to their customer base. For instance, sending emails. Let's say yesterday or the day before yesterday, I received an email from a supplier in France. I don't even live in France, but I'm interested in what they do because I'm really interested in those issues. And basically, they ask people to make an effort and to use less electricity during daytime because of the weather condition that would lead to less production of electricity during that period. So they just sent an email to people asking them to make an effort. And this is already like the 6th time I receive an email from them. And they've always communicated on the kind of result they had. And they were really positive kind of results. Because people feel that they can do something and it's kind of easy. So you tell me, okay, please don't wash your laundry today, but do it tomorrow. You can go for it, right? It's something that's kind of easy to do. But that's really about, let's say, engaged people. There's also some people who are not willing to engage or they have no obvious reason to engage. So they are a little bit hard to convince. And for them, there are also some solutions that do exist that are maybe a little bit more technology oriented. For instance, with aggregators and really some smart devices or really some very smart plugs that can be installed in the home that will kind of monitor the consumption and kind of move a little bit around the consumption. It's it usually comes at no cost for the household and at very, let's say, limited cost for rollout, but it has some kind of tremendous benefits really for the grid and therefore for the whole stability of the electricity production, consumption, etc. So that's kind of very positive. But again, you have to engage the different audience, understanding their own why. And I would say that in a sense that goes back to some proper marketing. And you know what? I think one of the problems of the energy sector is that it has been very, very much, let's say, oriented by, technical choices, by political choices as well, by security choices. But I think it's really time for the marketing part of the conversation to step in.
Yeah, that's quite interesting to hear about. And I think, to your point, it really comes down to education of the different audiences. And you have to reach them in ways that is going to resonate with them if you're going to make those impacts as well. So at the end of the day, it does come down to, how can you educate them through different types of marketing that you can proactively share with them to get them to change their behavior. So the energy sector is also collecting a ton of consumer data, more than ever before. Same with pretty much every area in our lives today. So when we've spoken previously, you've mentioned, a bit jokingly, but you've mentioned our toasters could spy on us. So can you elaborate on the risks in consumer protection and data handling that businesses should address?
Yeah, so that is something that I won't say that it's a source of concern, because of course not all toasters will spy on you, but it's actually pretty easy to understand the patterns of households observing their electricity consumption, right? And if we want, everything is now connected kind of everywhere. So if an organization is willing to malevolent, they could actually check a lot of things and get a lot of information from us. And that's also kind of the problem with having everything automated within the home, or if you call Alexa or Siri to kind of automated everything in your home, maybe after a while it becomes a little bit rogue, or sometimes you get a little bit some kind of funny answers. Who never had Siri as replying when you say something completely off topic, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's something we need to be careful of. I'm not paranoid. I won't say that it will happen everywhere, or it can happen or that anything is spying on you. I'm not saying that. But I think it's really important to really support the kind of regulation and policy making that sets some strict boundaries between the different services, right? Because it's a thing to have information about your patterns and be able to kind of modulate the consumption to make sure that there are no failures on the grid. It's one thing, but it's another thing to have really something that spies over and looks over your shoulder, right? And know exactly when you come back home and what you cook to your kids. Right, so it's kind of important to be mindful of that. In Europe, we are quite lucky because we have very strong regulations on this kind of assets. But I would say that it's really not such a surprise that in Europe and currently, for instance, in Baltic countries, there are so many tensions over some Russian ships that they might be trying to cut some power lines between Baltic countries and the rest of Europe. I mean, it's, of course, they are looking into it, because electricity, as I said at the very beginning, it's really a lifeline. It's what we need. So there is so much that goes into it, so much that we cannot perform, we cannot function nowadays without this kind of tool. So it's really important to acknowledge they're here, and because acknowledging that we are actually dependent on something makes energy, also makes us realize how dependent we are, how much we rely, how much of our lives really depend on it, and how precious it is, in a sense.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, anytime the power goes out, anyone with kids, or just if you're by yourself, also you just realize you're like, what can I do that doesn't require power at this point? So it's almost every one of our hobbies requires some sort of power as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, but there's oftentimes a tension between regulatory compliance and these business-led initiatives in energy transition. So how can companies find the sweet spot between these approaches while maintaining the consumer trust?
Yeah, the term consumer trust is really central. And I would say that the main aspect is really about transparency, like knowing what kind of data is collected, what kind of assets are collected, how the dots are made between the kind of different areas where information is collected, and who own them, how it is used, what is also the kind of backbone. So who is going to be looking at it, who is going to ensure that there is really a strict governance, that you can pull out your data, you can really withdraw for any kind of programs, that actually there is accountability. And I think it's really the sweet spot, in my view, is accountability, making sure that the businesses actually follow the kind of regulation that exists, the standards that exist, that they do engage in meaningful consultations and policy making when they are being asked, when consumers ask for more information, when they have a complaint, that they actually turn to the ombudsman or the consumer groups, really, and they engage in those kind of meaningful conversations. Because at the end of the day, what matters is really the attitude. Do you see, as a business, do you see any kind of feedback as something confrontational, or do you accept maybe the negative feedback as something you can grow with, or that can help you grow? So it's really about kind of, okay, are you in a kind of a positive mindset where you will really welcome the feedback and say, okay, we are missing a target here. Maybe we are implementing something, but we are missing some people. Maybe we are not being proactive enough towards this segment of the population. Maybe on the other hand, we are being really good because, let's say that elderly ladies, they really like to talk to our customer service. Maybe that's a good sign, right? That people actually like the company and feel some empathy. And I think this is really empathy and accountability that are things that at the end of the day do make a difference.
Yeah. So I feel like there's like this undertone to a lot of the things that you're saying throughout this, and it comes back to the building of certainly building trust, but through education as well. And you can only do that through understanding the different segments of your audience. So to your point, if elderly ladies, want to, discuss back and forth in a certain way, and, younger generations might do it in a separate way, educating them on what's happening and, what we were just talking about in terms of, leveraging data. If you can leverage their data in a way that inspires them or can get them to change their behavior in a proactive way, that all comes back to building that trust up with people as well. So again, just keeping everything on a positive note, and also accepting any critiques and then adapting based on all of that can be very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also very important for energy businesses to also acknowledge that they come from a place of mistrust, in the sense that there are some data that go out every other year in Europe that show that the energy sector is the one where people put the least trust in, right? It's such an essential service.
Yeah.
Energy, electricity, gas, it's such an essential services, but people don't trust the providers. Why? Because maybe they feel that they are tied, that they don't have a say, that they don't have agency, that their supplier will always make whatever they want. That's not a good starting point, right? On the other hand, you can say, okay, so there is this space of mistrust and people don't trust us. What can we do to be better? What can we do? What can we learn from other sectors? How can we really shape the conversation to be part of, let's say, a more proactive and more positive framework to make sure that actually we people understand that we understand their concerns, right? It's really complex, but I think it's also really fascinating to see how the most disruptive market players at the moment are the one who actually focus on trust.
Yeah. And in a sense, it comes back to really the theme of this as well, which is you can humanize it. And that's how you can build trust. Energy, as you just said, is one of those things that we are just so dependent on in our day-to-day lives that it might feel like we have very little say in how much it costs or what it does, because we need it so badly. So we're going to consume it anyway. But if you can humanize it and you can say that, hey, we're here to try to help you as well, that comes back to building the trust.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say that it's not only about energy when it's supplied to you as something really, you turn the light on and off, but the fact that you have so many players, so many decentralized production, solar panels, etc., you want trust along the whole line. Right? It's not only about the suppliers. It's also about the service providers who will install the solar panels and make sure that everything runs smoothly in your home.
Yeah. Now, on just to tee off of that topic a bit, people are using AI and language models to simplify these complex energy concepts. So, how can organizations use these tools to maintain human connections that consumers crave?
I think here we need to get back to what AI is. I like to call it augmented intelligence because I use it. I use it in my work. I use it to really simplify certain areas of my work. But what makes a difference for me is how I use it. And it's really how I train my platform, how I make sure it goes into a certain direction, what I feed into it. Because at the end of the day, there is nothing artificial in artificial intelligence, right? It's really fed by what we put in it. And it's as good as it can get. If you really give it bad information, well, it's going to just act as another echo chamber. Do we actually need more echo chamber? Well, let's have a proper conversation about that another time, right? But it's really about how you make use of the kind of tools and how you really acknowledge that there are human beings behind base, right? They are the people who a few months, weeks, years ago did train the AI, the LLM, or they are also the people who are reviewing some things. They are the people who are analyzing the assets, really doing things. But I think the key is about the kind of governance of AI, and again, knowing that people will have agency at some point, that they will be able to withdraw their data if they want, that there is some human oversight, that, for instance, the problem, in my view, are more related to like automated decisions. If you can't appeal an automated decision, well, in that case, you have a big problem. But if you have some processes that are quite automated and then you can appeal and talk to a human being, then that becomes quite an interesting tool to kind of really process the information, process the data, right? So it's about the kind of different levels where you use it. But I'm completely convinced that we shouldn't think of AI as really end of it all. It's one tool that you have to learn how to use. Just like, I don't know, Excel. Excel, it can make pretty nice calculation, but if you don't put the formula, it will never get into the calculation you want, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's an enabler, and I think putting the right function or equation into Excel is very similar to, can you make the right prompts with AI as well? Because the quality of your prompts and understanding, going back to the why that you were saying earlier, you have to be able to understand that in order to create a sophisticated enough prompt to get to an answer that AI can really help you with as well. So Marine, just one question left for you. So, we've bed talking a lot past few minutes that trust is fundamental in energy transition. So what advice would you recommend to organizations to take to build and maintain consumer trust while pushing forward with innovation in energy transition solutions?
Yeah, again, let's go back to the why. Why would you need consumers to trust you? And what would you want them to trust you with? in the sense that if I ask you today, Erin, do you trust me? You say, yeah. But if I ask you, Erin, would you trust me to perform open heart surgery on you?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? That sounds quite fair, right?
Quite a risk.
So, yeah, maybe quite a risk. I mean, you don't know. Maybe I'm actually a surgeon in disguise. But no, again, I think it's about really the trust is really trust in what? Trust in why? Why would you need trust and why would you need trust in that really specific relationship? And how you can really prove that you are trustworthy. And it goes back to being accountable, being show that you can listen, being empathetic, show your humanity. Because as human being, we decide where we put our trust in. Okay, it's something that at the end of the day, we decide to do. And there are really interesting theorists, people who have been really looking into it that are absolutely fascinating. But again, it's why would you trust somebody in what, to do what? Do ask those kind of questions. Trust, it must be earned, and it's a process. It's a process for somebody to trust you, for a group to trust you, and it's kind of easy to break that trust too. So it's also something, I mean, you need to nurture. You need to nurture that trust. You need to keep on being accountable. You need to keep on being empathetic. You need to keep on listening. You need to keep on making sure that the feedbacks are there. And, you know, it comes with probably, again, good communication, transparent communication, and really some kind of understanding that you don't have answers to everything and you can't be trusted in all circumstances.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful sentiment. And it also just comes to being transparent when you are talking to people is how you really build it up. Well, Marine, thank you so much for everything that you shared. Really enjoyed having you on today.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Decisions Now. Check out all episodes at evalueserve.com/podcast, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes.